What's up, folks? I'm Chris, your NFL writer here at Occupy Fantasy, and football is back. The United Football League, the UFL, kicks off this weekend, week one of the first merge season between the USFL and XFL Spring Football Leagues has arrived. For the next 12 weeks, we'll be bringing you some videos on this channel covering the top plays for each of the regular season and postseason weeks in the United Football League. Usual order of business will apply here to the UFL preview show. Obviously, only have 4 games per week here in the regular season, so there is not as much to go through as there is on an NFL slate, but we know that you all are subscribed for some football content, so we're happy to go through the DFS plays for you. The biggest thing to be aware of with week one in spring football is that these offenses are still materializing. They're still trying to determine their identities. A lot of these coaching staffs in this newly merged league are from previous iterations of the XFL and USFL. So there are some predictions that we can make, some pretty good educated guesses we can make about how they're going to deploy players, but actual roles, specifically at pass catcher, are still to be determined. So as we move forward here and get into week 2, week 3, week 4, some of the things that we're going to learn are going to make it pretty easy, I think anyway, for us to figure out who we should be playing week in and week out. Early in the season, I do think the first thing we want to do is focus on maximizing touches in our DFS lineups. Easiest way to do that here in the UFL is with some of these running backs. See, I have CJ Marable, the starting running back for the Birmingham Stallions, on the screen here, $7,900 here on DraftKings. Birmingham is favored by 3.5 points on the road against the XFL champion Arlington Renegades to open the UFL season here. The reason I'm beginning the show with a discussion about Mr. Marable is that he is actually featured as one of the top offensive players to watch by Fox Sports' Eric Williams, who put together this great article on foxsports.com going over some of the top offensive players to watch in the UFL this season. I've read through this, and I think Eric is spot on. If you've watched any spring football from the United States Football League or the XFL over the last couple of seasons, a lot of these names will be familiar to you, and a lot of these players, even though they're on some new teams, should still be some of the best options. First thing you'll notice when you play UFL DFS on DraftKings is that the lineup format is completely different. You're required to roster 1 quarterback and 1 running back instead of the 2 normal running backs that you have to roster. You don't have to play any wide receivers, although, I mean, you should, obviously. They've grouped pass catchers together as wide receiver, tight end. You play 2 of those, and then you have 2 flex spots. So you can play up to 4 pass catchers, you can play up to 3 running backs, or any combination in between with all 3 of those positions here, the way that lineups are built in spring football. And I actually think this makes this a ton of fun. It's not as easy to jam the best plays week in and week out. You have to make some decisions about who to exclude from your lineups when you're playing UFL. And so it just creates a little bit of an added wrinkle here when you prepare for any given slate. Marable in the first game of the weekend as the starting running back for the favored Birmingham Stallions, who are back-to-back defending champions of the USFL, looking to win their first UFL title. Marable played for the Stallions in each of the last couple of seasons and has been one of their more versatile weapons on offense. He does see targets in the passing game. You can see his stats from 2023 on the screen here, and he will get a decent amount of touches in the backfield as well. It will be interesting to see how the Stallions' identity changes this season because they will have a different quarterback, perhaps a few different quarterbacks playing for them this season. So Marable, my top play on this slate, gonna tail the fact that the Stallions are one of the better spring football teams of the last couple of years, and the fact that obviously some of the reporters that are covering the league have picked up on the fact that Marable is definitely worth rostering here in the first week of the season. St. Louis Battlehawks are the biggest favorite this week. They're favored by 6.5 points over the Michigan Panthers. We have the DC Defenders. They are favored by 6 points on the road against the San Antonio Brahmas. Already talked about the Stallions being favored by 3.5 points. And the home Houston Roughnecks are favored by 1 point against the Memphis Showboats. So that's the rundown of the betting market information here. I'm going to go through by implied team total, the players at quarterback that we're considering. Highest team total on the board belongs to the DC Defenders at just under 25 points here in their matchup with the Brahmas. Jordan Ta'amu is expected to return under center as the starting quarterback for the Defenders, who lost the championship in a stunning upset to the Renegades last summer. This was the best team in 2023's XFL, and Ta'amu actually was one of the better quarterbacks to play in spring fantasy football because he brings you a lot on the ground. He averaged 4.7 fantasy points just on the ground. Ta'amu had 3 rushing touchdowns last season, 16 passing touchdowns, and was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league, averaging 8.3 yards per pass attempt for the Defenders in the 2023 XFL season. He is definitely locked in as the starter for the Defenders here in week 1. Perhaps the highest pedigree quarterback in the league would be St. Louis's A.J. McCarron. Battlehawks have the second highest implied team total in the league this week, and he's the most expensive player on the slate. He was the best quarterback across both spring leagues in 2023, averaged 22.7 fantasy points per game, had 24 touchdown passes, 11 two-point conversions, and a 3-point conversion in the 9 games that he played in the regular season. McCarron sat out 1 game in 2023. Expect McCarron to be very efficient once again here in 2024, with plenty of his weapons returning from 2023 to the 2024 version of the Battlehawks. So McCarron and Ta'amu look like 2 of the best plays at the quarterback position, since betting markets expect them to be 2 of the most successful offenses here in week number 1 of the UFL season. We have the Birmingham Stallions with the 3rd highest implied team total on the slate. This is not a room that we can trust just yet. The word out of Stallions camp in the league right now is that they haven't necessarily decided who is going to be their starting quarterback. In fact, they may even deploy a tandem quarterback room. So it's been really difficult for Skip Holtz to make a decision on who's going to start. Jamar Smith was the starting quarterback in 2022 for the Stallions, their first season. He actually did start the season last year as well. He got injured in the first game and actually gave way to Alex Magoo, who earned his MVP season after that and played very, very well. So if you're asking me to flip a coin here, I do think Jamar Smith is the one that probably at least starts the season for the Birmingham Stallions. But in week 1, I would avoid this quarterback room because we are looking to maximize our touches at the position, and we already have gone through a couple of plays that are expected to have significantly more upside for playing time that's safe here in week number 1. I know that sounds like an oversimplification, but we want to maximize time on the field, and the Stallions have already come out and told us that these guys are probably going to be splitting reps to begin the season. The Houston Roughnecks are the next offense with a decent implied team total at just over 20 points. We've been told by Roughnecks media that Jarrett Guarantano is expected to start, and the Memphis Showboats is a tight game in spread markets, 1-point underdogs right now to the Roughnecks. Case Cook is formerly of the defunct Philadelphia Stars. It's going to be the starting quarterback here, and I think is also a fine play here to consider on the week 1 slate. One of the bigger underdogs against the Defenders, we have Chase Garbers, who's going to be the starting quarterback for the San Antonio Brahmas. The Brahmas are an offense to keep an eye on, I would say, moving forward here in 2024 in the UFL because of their offense led by A.J. Smith, the offensive coordinator under head coach Wade Phillips. They led the XFL's version of the Roughnecks as a coaching staff, one of the more effective passing offenses in the league. Garbers has a chance to make a splash and make some noise as a result. I do like the creative approach to calling plays from A.J. Smith. This is going to be a very interesting run and shoot offense here in the UFL, and Chase Garbers, probably one of the diamonds in the rough at a lower salary at quarterback this week you can consider. At the running back position, we already went over CJ Marable at the top of the video. The other good plays, I think, here will be Cameron Harris with the DC Defenders. Abram Smith is going to be out at least to start the season for the Defenders. Abram Smith had the highest volume of rushing attempts in the XFL in 2023, had 180 carries, averaged 12 fantasy points per game on the ground, and scored a ton of touchdowns. He had 8 rushing touchdowns in his games for the Defenders, firmly established himself as the starter. Cameron Harris had 1 game with the Defenders, had 2 touchdown rushes, was definitely an interesting play at the end of the 2023 season as a result, and should be the lead back with Abram Smith out. So with the Defenders heavily favored to begin the season, I do think Cameron Harris is well worth the price of admission here to begin the season at running back, and definitely on the Sunday only slate if we get one as well. So I'm interested in playing Marable and Harris from two of the better offenses this week. Sticking with the information that we can learn from betting markets, go back to the Battlehawks, who are the biggest favorite on this slate. It's unclear who is the starter here because we have not specifically seen depth charts released, but it's pretty likely that Wayne Gallman is the starting running back for the St. Louis Battlehawks here, a former NFL running back with the New York Giants. Gallman, $8,500 here for the Battlehawks. And then they have Matteo Durant, who did play with the Steelers and is an XFL veteran himself. Matteo Durant was on this team last year, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that he does take the reps to begin the season for the Battlehawks. But until we get some confirmation on who's starting here, I'm somewhat leery of deploying a Battlehawks running back in my lineup to begin the season. The Houston Roughnecks. Now, this is the USFL Houston team, previously known as the Gamblers. They took on the Roughnecks name. Mark Thompson was the best running back, not just in the USFL in 2023, but in all of spring football in 2023. Averaged 18.7 fantasy points just on the ground in the USFL last year. Had 14 rushing touchdowns in his 8 games that he played because he missed the beginning of the season. The same thing may happen again here in 2024. I guess his status is in the air for this game, according to James Larson of the Pro Football Network, one of the reporters covering the UFL this spring. If Thompson misses, we expect former Tennessee Volunteer Tion Evans to be a player to watch, according to James Larson, this week in the USFL. Just $5,100 at running back. So I have a lot of interest in at least slotting him into one of my flex spots here. Last game of the weekend, last game of the slate gives us some options to swap off of him if Thompson does, in fact, actually get reported as coming into play in week 1 of the UFL. But as far as maximizing touches is concerned to begin the season, I think you'll see a lot of 2 to 3 running back builds from some of the sharper players in the DFS space that are going to be engaging with UFL here in week 1 as we wait to learn more about how these offenses begin deploying their assets. And this is how I'm starting to formulate some of my build ideas as well as we begin the season here. At pass catcher, we have a ton of tight ends that have less teammates to compete with for reps on the field that are also high upside passing weapons in their offenses. The first of which plays in the first game of the season is going to be Sal Canella of the Arlington Renegades. Canel had the highest target share with 65 targets in 10 games for the Renegades last season. He also had the highest share of team air yards for the Renegades in the XFL last season. So not only is he their starting tight end with not really anyone else to compete with for reps out of that position on the field, he's going to see the most passing volume for the Renegades once again, with them largely returning a lot of the same players on offense. So I love Sal Canella at $5,500. He's going to be one of my favorite plays on this slate here because of that, for sure. On the Birmingham Stallions, on the other side of that same matchup, we have Jay Sternberger, formerly of the Green Bay Packers, was also on the Stallions last year. Sternberger was second on the team in targets and led the team in receiving touchdowns with 8 receiving touchdowns last season. At just $6,100, I love playing Sternberger this week as well. I'm going to be playing, I think, a lot of combinations of lineups that include these cheaper tight ends until we learn who the actual top wide receivers are going to be on each team. It'll allow us to get some of the top running backs, top quarterbacks, and really any defense we want, any kind of lineups that we want to build. Another tight end that had a really, really strong role in spring football last season on the New Orleans Breakers in the USFL was Sage Sarat. Sage Sarat is now going to be the starting tight end for the Memphis Showboats. So the Showboats have a lot of the offensive playmakers that were on 2023's New Orleans Breakers in the USFL because Memphis's head coach is John DeFilippo. Flip was the head coach of the Breakers last year in the USFL. Sage Sarat had 75 targets in 11 games for the Breakers in 2023. So Sarat is going to be another interesting tight end option that you can deploy that's also relatively cheap in DFS this week as a pass catching option. And then Cody Ladimer. Cody Ladimer was a member of the XFL's Orlando Guardians. He's now going to be the starting tight end for the San Antonio Brahmas in AJ Smith's very, very exciting pass-heavy offense. We look at how Orlando deployed players. I understand it was a different staff, but Latimer was far and away the most productive Orlando Guardian in 2023's XFL. Had 66 targets in 9 games played with 4 touchdown receptions. I would expect him to be one of the most productive pass catchers for the Brahmas here as well in 2024. Of the 4 tight ends I've discussed, he's the most expensive of this group, but definitely a good play right alongside the rest of these guys. Plenty of names at pass catcher that if you've been in the spring football streets before, you will definitely be familiar with. Hakeem Butler back with St. Louis was awesome last year for A.J. McCarron's Battlehawks. Butler led the team in targets, air yards, and touchdown receptions, so he's priced accordingly, of course. There's really no reason to expect him to have a lower target share here, and the same goes with Darius Shepard, who had 66 targets, just 7 less than Hakeem Butler. The St. Louis Battlehawks are basically running it back with the same offense. So the Battlehawks are one of the easier teams, I think, to kind of just tail the pricing that DraftKings has here and just stack the best plays if that's the direction you want to go with the Battlehawks. On Saturday evening, the second game of the slate here with their pass catchers. Tre Kirkland was one of the most important players in the 2023 Houston Roughnecks offense. He now stays with the Roughnecks coaching staff from last year and will be playing for the Brahmas on offense this season. Probably going to be one of the weapons that Chase Garbers relies on as well, alongside Cody Ladimer. So I do think DraftKings largely got the pricing correct here. Jonathan Adams was on that Breakers team for John DeFilippo. Amari Rogers isn't a new addition to the Birmingham Stallions. Justin Hall was one of the better receivers on the Houston Gamblers in 2023, now on the Roughnecks here in 2024. I'm going to be posting some projections in the Occupy Fantasy Discord for the Week 1 UFL slate, for the main slate, and for the showdowns. Keep an eye out for that. I want to stress that a lot of this is going to be a lot of educated guesswork until we learn more about how these teams are deploying their players. Projections will get sharper as we march through the season. The larger thing to rely on is any information that we can get from these teams based off of who's going to be on the field. So keep an eye on some of the reporting. The projections will be updated based off of what we learn moving forward as well here in the UFL. UFL projections completely free for Discord subscribers. So please, if you want to get that information from us, all we're asking is for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, become a member of the channel, and you will get access to all of our Discord channels, be able to discuss any of the sports that we cover here at Occupy Fantasy with additional content on the website. You'll get all of the UFL stuff in the Discord, in addition to these free videos week in and week out. I'm going to link Eric Williams' great article from foxsports.com here in the description of the video below as well, if you're interested in some of the other top plays around the league that some of the reporters are interested in here for week number 1 of the UFL season. Thank you all for watching. Good luck this UFL season if you're going to be joining us for this ride over the next 3 months, and we will talk to you next week for week 2.